Hey guys, I'm RozaldVaneGAME and welcome back to another episode of A Case in Distrust. Sorry I didn't show up in the main menu again, so apologies for that, but I pretty much clicked continue and this is where they were trying to recap what was going on. It's another day compared to the last half of the second episode, or the previous episode, so excuse my redo of this whole thing. But anyways, I had awoken in a daze to the blurred face of Sam Shipman, and the case of this is that we basically ended up in a bed, I guess, after going to the taxi cab to go visit Shipman at the San Francisco Police Department, but we don't really know what happened, apparently, because she kind of, like, our character Mosey? No. Damn it, I forgot her last name. But yeah, basically, our character basically just had a dream, a flash dream after going to the taxi cab, after being anxious about how she was going to be used to be, she would be used as a decoy to ruin, or to help the person Green, Mr. Green, to get out of town after he's finished with his money, like, laundering stuff, or his money stuff, or his bootlegging stuff. Anyways, let's continue. I looked up at, oh yeah, I already read this, but if you've missed this one, this would be, rewatch the last part of the last episode. I looked up at him from my laying position on the Murphy bed. He swung his leg. I will reread it anyways, just because I want to recap myself, rather. Thought you'd never come around, he said. Okay. What happened? I tried to ask him something, but another bolt of pain raced up my elbow. All I managed was a groan. Relax, BC. Just a few scratches. Quite the auto crash. Flew straight through the front window. They took out a large piece of glass from your right arm. Oh, so we did get a car accident. Get in a taxi cab accident. Where the guy just, like, the taxi cab dude just, and we, yeah, because in 1920s there was no such thing as safety precaution in cars, so there was no such thing as seatbelts at that time in the 1920s, so we literally did fly out of the window because that's how it was back then. But I'm surprised that we didn't die. That's the interesting part. I nodded in agreement. I grimaced as the shake sent a sharp pain through my skull. I mumbled the words, auto crash, to myself. I wondered how bad the accident must have been. Shipman removed a flank from his pocket, unscrewed the top, and handed it to me. Not the best hooch, but might get rid of that banging in your head. I took a swig. I shook my head, which was slowly clearing. I felt whiskey would only make it worse. My thoughts were coming back on their own. Excuse me. I was just, like, trying to clear my systems here. I went to give the flask back to Shipman, but he put out a hand to stop me. Hang on to it. Might change your mind after what I'm about to tell you. Don't tell me Green ran off. I propped myself up on my left shoulder to listen. About Green's case. The two of us figured he was going to fake his own death. Shipman clicked his tongue to his teeth and looked towards the floor. That ain't happening. Last night, Connor Green was shot through the heart twice. Oh, so Connor did die. Damn, dude. So now we're gonna look for his killer, I guess? And that's the second half of the story here. I mean, this is not a long game. When I saw it on the HLTB website, How Long to Beat website, I usually check How Long to Beat usually before I start my playthroughs because I want to see how long it takes for me to kind of beat it. On average, it's 3 hours, but we're kind of approaching that 3 hour mark here. But wait, does this mean that this whole case would be shut down because of that? I don't feel like that should be the case. Unless there's some choicing that causes the game to go a little longer than I made a mistake on. Might have been interestingly weird to me, but... What? I shouted. The exclamation was impulsive. I swung my legs quickly around and sat on the edge of my bed. My headache had suddenly vanished. Whoa there, Shipman said. Look, been here with you all night, he added quickly. In that chair beside the bed. Just telephoned the station to check in. And that's the rap they gave me. Told them I'd known from you, and they said they'd chase it up. How do you know if it was him? Another involuntary question. I was running on my instincts. PC, faking your death involves a mangled body. Shot through the chest, his face is still intact. However, Green was planning on doing whatever Green was planning on doing. He didn't get that far. And we looked it up. He doesn't have a twin. That would be too easy. Shipman grinned. Green hired you for this case, he's continued. Gives you every right to follow it up if you want. That said, if he was likely taking you for a ride, wouldn't blame you if you want to drop it at this point. But I'd like your help, PC. You know the case could use your head, even if it's been a little bumped. Once you're feeling better, I'll be at the station. Come find me there. I don't know what Shipman voice that I used previously, so I'm just sticking to the sort of like kind of voicing. But anyways, Shipman stood up and cracked his back. Maybe I'll catch some shut-eye on top of my desk too. Sure beats that chair you got. He turned and walked away. I stood up from my creaking bed and surveyed the cluttered apartment. Oh, so they didn't even take me to the hospital. They just took me back to my apartment. And I just slept there all this time. That's kind of crazy, though. No, the cat, man. The cat slept at the foot of the bed. I scratched behind his ear, and he seemed to like that. The apartment was already cramped when the Murphy bed was up. With it down, I could barely squeeze through the living room. Packed cigarettes were the latest trend, but I still preferred to roll my own. The ashtray was evidence that it was a practiced skill. I suppose I had a lot of free time back then. I've taken copies of my old murder cases from the SFPD records when I left. Love reading through them, even though my own contributions were minimal. At the time, I longed for those types of jobs. The truth was, any work was hard to find for a female detective. Which is kind of true. The lamp had belonged to my uncle. I already read this one, I believe, because it said exactly the same lines, I guess. My old notebook, now filled with the brim. I wrote everything down, even the minor details. Never know what can be useful. Regular ice blocks, tinged yellow with age, half blocked with kitchen doorway. My income rarely kept me stocked in it. And right now, it was empty. Alright, we should head out, I think. I stared at the doorway and took a deep breath. I suppose I owed Shipman enough to help solve the case. Even if Green had given me the roundaround, after all, what type of detective would leave a case half solved? There was only one place to go. The police station. Hopefully we don't crash twice in one sitting, because that would suck like hell, because we already went through one hit. Although Green had just been using me, his life had apparently been in danger all along. I resolved to find his killer. I headed to the North Beach station for any information Shipman could give me before starting the case. I wonder how his wife feels now, because we know his wife cared about him a lot. I waved down a taxi and was on my way. I thought I might talk with a driver to pass the time. He was young, not a teenager, but far off. The redness in his face and a mean scowl told me he was angry. Don't much like driving taxi cabs, I offered. Oh yeah. Yeah, because back in the 1920s as well, there wasn't any child labor laws, I think, at the time. So a lot of like kids teenagers especially too, were making like money because they didn't have proper education. Like around this time, I would say. I wouldn't say it's exactly at 1920s that the child labor laws kicked in. I think it's around the same time, around this particular time period, that they do kind of had that child labor law starting to become apparent, because kids are working and they weren't going through school to be educated in a sense. But it's interesting to see that as a teenager driving us, rather. We didn't even have a chance to talk to whoever the guy who drove the last taxi cab we got into and hit us. It was kind of sad. He looked quizzically at me over his shoulder before understanding what I meant. No, lady. I like it right enough. Just some bozo for you were in here and giving me hell because I look like the boy his daughter's going with. Oh, oof. That guy that he drove thought he looked like the kid that is dating his daughter. Went off about how my generation was ruining America. That scumbag don't know jack. I wasn't. It sounds like you know, I guess. Yeah, let's continue this conversation. It sounds like you know more, I asked. I'm no genius, he replied. But you talk to anyone from the last century, they'll tear off your ear for just being young. How'd you get so high, I wonder? Given the world in the 1890s like a smooth running roadster. Then what do they think? Bashing on every curb in the sight. Their greed, their war, their politics. Now they give us a ruined clunker, and they're mad at our manners when we grab the keys. I guess I agree. I agree with him. The Great War was the hardest fought. At home and abroad, I said. The old man put us there and had some nerve. He replied hotly. And after those years, they tell us to get in line? It's a bum deal to me, sister. We're in the information age, and the news of the world is crap. They're just angry we can see their folly. Taxicab rolled up to a stop. Anyhow, the driver said, thanks for letting me blow off some steam. Have a nice day, miss. I opened the door and stepped out. That was a nice conversation. A really nice one. I mean, the teenager wasn't rude. He tried his best to, like, keep up with, like, the whole conversation about how the guy was, like, blaming the next generation. I mean, it's weirdly typical for an older person to feel so outdated that they feel like they relate in some capacity by saying, hey, we belong here just as much as you do, but you're not listening to us because we're here longer than you have. And it's like, it's a balance between things for somebody who's, like, probably super old versus somebody who's super young. So, like, if an 18-year-old meets a 90-year-old, and the 90-year-old's just, like, blaming the 18-year-old for all the problems in the world, it's half true and half false, I would say. It's not really 100% usually. It's sometimes the 18-year-old would be the one who achieves so much wonders, like, I don't know, like, achieving, like, economic peace or something. Or not economic, what was the word? Yeah, I was thinking ecology achievements. Like somebody who was, like, protecting the world through cleanup, world, like, trash cleanup and stuff like that. Like, they're trying to make the best for what they can. And I think that sometimes older people are like, you're not making enough of the progress. Back then I did the same thing, and it was way better than what you're doing. It kind of manner. But I mean, it's hard. You can't please everyone, honestly, and there's no such thing as pleasing everyone. It's for the sake of, I guess, being better, I guess. Anyways, headquarters building dominated the corner of the Kearny and Washington and Chinatown, rebuilt after the 1906 earthquake. I thought it looked even more sour than it had before. I stepped out of the taxicab and walked through the station doors, ready to chase any leads on green, but standing in front of me as I entered, bawling her eyes from their sockets, was Mrs. Green. Oh, she's actually in the station. She saw me and brought her wailing closer. Comes close to me just to alleviate herself from her sadness. Malone, she exhaled through her sobbing. You were working with my husband. What happened? Her breathing obscured her next sentences, but I got the general idea. I told her I knew as little about the matter as she did, but that I was looking into it, and I was sure the officers were doing their best. She begged me to help them, again drowning most of her sentences with her sobbing. I promised I would try. She took a slow inhale, raised her chest, and walked out of the station. Wait, what? She just walked out. Why? Who the heck is this? It's just some random guy with a cigar on his mouth. When she was out of sight, Fred Grant came around the corner and let out a snort. Grant was another investigator for the SFPD. Study his ruddy face, I guess. I studied this ruddy face, strewn with broken capillaries. I think that's the word. Capillaries. that it gave the impression of a map of streams. A cigar often poked through his mouth, hardening his jaw and twisting his face into a scowl. I suppose that was an appropriate look for a man who enjoyed his bribes in liquid form. Grant had never been a supporter of policewomen, and he was no fan of mine. That's kind of rude, dude. Just because our character's a lady? This guy's not getting with the times, I guess. He lighted the cigar and said, "The widow seems pretty torn up about him. He really helped." No, actually, that sounds like Frankie a little bit. I want to try to do something different. With a cigarette in his mouth, I feel like he would probably speak differently, too. "The widow seems pretty torn up about him. They're really helping her out. You're really helping her out?" I said I was, and he gave another snort. "Huh. Figures she'd go to you after we told her no. I raised a questioning eyebrow. "Look, last thing I gotta do is head to the tin spoon, then this goes in the freezer." That meant he was about to close the case cold. You aren't chasing it up?" I asked. He looked appalled that I would even ask. "We've got more to deal with than some dead gangster. The captain doesn't care about crap like this. So look, so long as it's not spreading too far." "And what about the girl? What do she expect?" he's asked. "This broad goes and marries an Irishman. Probably killed by one of his own, or some doggo. Also, some bums all those bums run together." I gave him a frown, to which he responded, "Look, if the missus wants you on this, that's her gamble, and it ain't gonna lead you nowhere. And don't expect support from the boys. Not even if I find Green's killer?" He laughed. "If you get a confession, we'll cop him. Not something the DA can thumb his nose through either. They gotta admit 3 things. Means, how they killed Green. Opportunity, when they did it. Motivation, why they'd bother. You do that, then sure, we'll be right behind you. But there ain't nobody here looking into it, I promise." He pulled on the cap and walked out. Okay, that's pretty scummy of him to do that. Saying that this case was going to be closed cleanly, coldly, where nobody even gives a crap about that death. That's kind of sad. I hurled a glare in Grant's direction, and I was still fuming as I turned down the hallway towards Shipman's office. Shipman was frowning at the stacks of papers atop his desk, but he stood up and smiled when he saw me. Glad you came. I vented about Grant. I asked him what he found. I asked him what he found on the case thus far. He laughed and motioned at the paper stacks. "Not in any way related to Green. Piled under this trash now. Nobody's looking into Green's case here anyway. I must have scowled a mean look at him because Shipman was quick to shake his head. "Not the case is dead, PC, but Captain has no one on it. Even Grant's coming off of as soon as he can. We're underwater with other bunk." "So you have nothing for me?" "Not sure. Department still did the regular foxtrot." Excuse me, my throat's gonna die on me because I read the lines of the way I did with the other character that my throat's just dying on me. He tossed me a beige folder. Inside was a large black and white photo of Green's face. Muscles relaxed and eyes closed. It looked like almost not a normal, apart from his flattened hat behind his head, and the dirt and grass behind that. The report behind the picture noted 3 important clues. First, that Green died at midnight the previous night. I cursed myself that I'd been so close to stopping it. Second, that Green was killed with 2 .45 caliber bullets to the chest. Those slugs weren't from a pea shooter. Green was killed by a mean gun. Finally, Night Green was found this morning, lying in the Washington Square Park that was only a block away from the Tin Spoon. I noted each of those facts and gave the folder back to Shipman. Alright, so it's midnight. Not far from the Tin Spoon, found in the morning, and was killed by a gun. .45 caliber. All we got, Shipman said, laying the folder back on his desk. Impinge the gunman, if you can prove the case, but you got to solve it without much support. Don't have time to help. Oh, Shipman's still saying stuff. I didn't realize it. Don't have time to help either, he sighed. No point coming back here until we've got your man. At least I'm on the case, yeah. At least I'm on the case, I said. That's good enough to leave me tickled pink. Shipman laughed. But listen, we had a confession on this one. Captain doesn't want to run around. Who's reading? Oh, this is him still, okay. Right. Grant excuse me. Right. Grant mentioned they'd have to admit to how, why, and when they killed Green. That's it. Prove that, we'll pick them up, he said. Never been on a murder before, right? Oh no, this is still him. God dang it. It's hard to tell because it's like, it doesn't close out the quotes, so I can tell that it continues on to like, with the same speaker from that point. I mean, I got used to that, and I like it a lot. I used to write like this a little bit, because I like doing that a lot with the story essays that I've written, because it's easier to just kind of get used to that kind of way where it's not, it's kind of similar to playwriting in a sense, but the hard part is just kind of reading like descriptive stuff that comes off of it that just makes it harder to read. Anyways, never been on a murder, right? Before, right? Can get tense. Just know, if you accuse someone but can't prove everything, they'll turn like a switch. Might like you one minute, but hate you the next. Chatting with folks is your easiest route to more information, but won't get any banter after you accuse someone of murder. So, be careful who you accuse. Could make your case harder if you go the wrong way. Okay. Alright, I get it, I said, and I internalized it. And remember, Shipman concluded, plenty of lies out there, and before you can contradict them, but you can contradict means, motive, or opportunities with anything in your notes. I thanked him and walked out of his office. Alright. I stood outside the police station and went over the mantra. I have to prove means, motive, and opportunity for anyone I suspected of the murder. Once I found all three for a single person, I have them licked. I started out to begin the chase. I have them licked. It's like an old term for saying like I have them noted or something. Alright, who do we want to go? Where do we want to go first? I mean, Stable was the last. Or Stable doesn't seem like he would be the type to do that kind of thing, but he could lie. But yeah, like the suspects are technically on the board now at this point. I was debating where to go next. Okay. It's definitely not Frankie, but it'd be hilarious that it is Frankie. I mean, I don't think that should be the case. It shouldn't be. That kind of feels scummy a little bit. It's not really like surprising. It's not a plot twist per se. It's just terrible. But then again, he's the only one who knows about the whole alcohol situation, about being from Canada or not, is like kind of interesting to me a little bit. That he might be a suspect in that case or that regards. For Tin Spoon, I don't think that the Tin Spoon people are that smart or able to detect that his stuff is to do the thing, but it could be him. Would it be the wife? I doubt it, but it could be. I wouldn't be surprised if the wife did it. Same for Stables, but I feel like Stable just kind of is like a red herring. I really feel like Stable's definitely a red herring. The only three suspects I would feel is most inclined to the kill of Green would be the wife, the boss who paid him, or Frankie, which I doubt Frankie. Frankie is like the lowest on the list, but still a plausibility. Because we did converse with him a lot about it. Green's house, let's go. Mrs. Green had pleaded with me at the police station. I hope she would be more helpful than she had been on the previous day. Let's talk to somebody who's probably not that guilty, but is probably part of the guilt. I gave my address and slouched in the backseat in the taxi cab. I thought a good way to pass the journey might be to chat with the driver. The driver was somewhere in his 50s, but drove like he'd soon be dead. Bounding through the streets, honking at anyone in his way. Making good time, I commented. Ah! He sailed like an old ship captain. Congestion! Okay. Oh, that's the old man still. Oh, these motorists, and not one of them knows how to drive. Lunatics! The last word that he shouted through the window. You see Life magazine? He continued. 13% chance increase in auto deaths this year to last. 14 the year before. Most of them pedestrians. He crested about another hill, and my head bounced off the car's ceiling. I mean, we did get our car hit in the last ride, so. Most folks run around out of moonshine at home and then take the car to the speaky. Can't even walk, and then they can handle the road. The car's tires squealed as we rounded a corner. Well, not me, sister. This car leaps when and I put my foot down, and you just gotta know what you're doing. We screeched to a halt at my destination. I stumbled out of the taxi cab as quickly as possible, thankful to still have my every limb. I'm not gonna read this description again. I know it was like read before already, so. I came upon the Green's house and knocked on the door. This time Mrs. Green opened it quickly. Miss Malone, she panted with noticeably shock in her eyes. I'm just frightened about people knocking at my door, she said by way of explanation. After what happened to my husband, everything feels so cold. Oh, I'm blabbering. Please, come on inside. She led the way to 2 chairs, and we sat down. I'm sorry reading it more femininely. I feel like she is kind of like a feminine type. Like, a bit more ladylike kind of type. But then again, I don't know. I mean, this is just reading off of how I think of it, I guess. She was more awake than the previous day, but her hair was a bit tousled, and her S's hung in the air, long enough to belie her lack of complete sobriety. Have you found anything about my husband's killer? She asked. Oh, this is hard to tell. Usually nodded as yes, and shook my head as a no, usually. But I always get confused with the two, because I feel like shaking your head doesn't have a specific, doesn't have a specific, direction when you're shaking your head. And then nodding is, I guess, yeah, it makes sense, because shaking is like you're shaking wobbling, and then when you're nodding, it's like you have like a notification, but I shook my head. I shook my head and replied that there was nothing definitive just then. I said I needed to ask her some questions that might spark the investigation. She straightened her chest and replied with, certainly. I'm not going to accuse Fanny, what the fudge? But I guess this might be an achievement if I accuse her really early without it. Alright. Motive, opportunity, and means. Okay, so... I want to ask about the gray trench coat, I guess. I glanced at the coat that hung on the rack. Where did you get this? I asked. Her unfocused eyes moved to the gray trench. Connor brought it home one day. It was too small for his frame, but I thought it looked swell on him. On me. Seems built for a man, I said. Sure, it's the freedom age, darling. We can wear anything on, or even nothing at all. Okay, I guess. So, Connor had something to do with the coat, then, with Lewis in general, I feel like. Empty bottles, maybe? I motioned to the bottles on the ground. Yes, I make a terrible housemaid, she said. It's hard for a working girl, you understand? In many ways I did, but my clutter was less inebriating, and I told her so. Sometimes the vocal cords need a lubrication. A little lubrication, she smiled. Okay, guess. I'm a little scared because the button of accusation is like literally right under the notes, and I can potentially misclick. So I'm hoping they would have some sort of like confirmation button to say, hey, are you really going to accuse this person? Because that saves me from misclicking on the wrong thing. I hate it. Got a threatening letter, has a bootlegging scheme, suspects Redstone stable. I want to ask about following her husband. How did you end up at the Southern Coffee yesterday? I asked her. I told you... Oh, that's her. I told you, I followed Connor to your apartment. I became furious when I saw he was calling to another woman. And why were you shadowing your husband to begin with? I pressed. Oh, that... She stuttered slightly. Well, I had heard rumors that Connor might have been unfaithful. I discovered they were baseless, but... Well, a wife never truly knows. That is why I followed you all the way to Southern Coffee. I had to know the truth, Miss Malone. Fair, I guess. I guess that didn't really... I wanted to press further about following your husband to see when was the last time you followed your husband, but I guess she stopped at a certain point. Singer of the Tin Spoon. Yes, I'm kind of curious about that. You're a jazz singer at the Tin Spoon? I asked. She gave a languid nod. I wonder how she'd started singing, so I asked about her roots. Well, she started. Papa never liked the petting parties, or the liquor, or the young men in roadsters. But we never made a fuss about it, not until I started singing. That's enough to get a girl disowned. I suppose I was a teenage prima donna, looking for attention, she sighed. Where were you raised? Where were you raised, I questioned. She smiled, but there was a little hint of cruelty behind it. I'm a Stern, Miss Malone. The only child of Abraham and Elise. Or, is it Elise or Elise? I don't know. I'll say Elise. Elise, my paternal grandmother was Frances Strauss, sister of Levy. Your father is that Alabama Stern? I raised an eyebrow. He now owns a full quarter of the Levy Strauss company. And you're wondering how I came to this? She looked around the room. I imagine she would have cackled, but the laudanum kept her emotions muted. Well, I traded wealth for freedom at a young age, and I would do it again. Okay, so I guess the laudanum is to just soothe her. A broken levee. Achievement unlocked. Okay, that was a weird achievement to get to. I understand the reasoning. I nodded and changed the subject back to the case. That was a weird achievement that I just obtained as that was the case. Alright, I'm so far not getting any good clues here, it seems like. I don't think she has anything to do with the letter. I guess I could ask her about, like, the tin, I guess, nearby. Yeah, that would be the great way to figure out some clues off of this. But anyways, I'll stop here for now. Because I want to... I'm seeing myself out of time anyways. But I did get an achievement, so that's a good thing to kind of end off on for myself. And also we got a thing to progress the story a little bit here. In terms of asking her questions. But... otherwise, thank you guys for watching. Hope to see you guys in the next episode of Another Video Minds. Hope you guys have a great, amazing day, weekend, nights, or whenever you're watching this. Next episode, let's go ahead and continue this case to see if we can get more clues from Mrs. Green and figuring out if she has means, motives, or I guess, like... I forgot what the last one. Means, motive, and something. But anyways, yeah, like... a reason, I think it was. But yeah, it's usually just the case of motive and like their alibi. We just need to find out like their stuff, like what they've been through at that second time frame, and then what they were doing, where and what they were doing at that time frame, and that's all we need to know. And then the motive, obviously, would be the last thing. yeah, otherwise that's it for this episode. Next episode, we'll go ahead and continue this investigation with Mrs. Green, get as much information on her or from her, and move off to the Tin Spoon stable and or Frankie to see what they got to say. But otherwise, that's it for this episode. Next episode, that'll be that. Roz, out.